Hey guys, we're going to talk all about Game of Thrones' 6th episode of Season 6, Blood of My Blood. So full spoiler warning if you haven't seen the episode, but we gave you an extra day because this episode is going up an extra day late. Sorry about that, thanks to the holiday that we had. Also, we should note that Terry Schwartz is on vacation right now. Joshua, thanks for joining.
Sorry.
No, it'll be fun. Different energy this time. Let's try it out. Let's talk about. So again, your full spoiler warning. Let's dive right in though. This episode it began with Bran having some pretty notable visions, kind of a rapid fire montage flying at you. What did you think of what we were seeing in there?
It's something you definitely want to go back and like watch frame by frame. But
Yeah.
the general thing is like we saw the Mad King,
Yeah.
burn them all, the Dragonfire, Wildfire. The green fire explosions. We saw Jaime Lannister killing him on the throne, which was crazy. Something that we hear about a lot. You know, the Kingslayer.
Yeah.
And then just a couple like smaller little things again that you'd have to stop to see. But overall, it was cool to see that. Although not a lot of it was game changing.
No, I mean some of it was just kind of cool as a fan. Again, it's not like we didn't know about the Mad King, and we very specifically knew Jaime killed him, and it's part of the lore that he sat on the throne after he killed him. But it's just kind of fun to get those glimpses of him, and especially since the Mad King is this sort of much talked about person in the history of this show and in the books. So just to get that little glimpse of he looked pretty mad. You know?
And we don't get flashbacks in Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
and Bran has been our conduit to all flashbacks this season
Right.
of actually getting to see stuff. So it was nice to finally like lay eyes on these iconic moments.
Yeah. Now, there was, as you said, there might have been a little bit of glimpses of the future in there, which I think makes sense, right? Especially with where Bran is and sort of this all-seeing, the three-eyed raven, that he would be seeing both the past, present, and future all at once. So there was stuff in there that could go either way as far as was it the past or future, but the wildfire, I think, is one of those things because clearly it's we've seen it on the show before.
Yeah.
We know it's part of like the history of Westeros, but you do wonder, might it be used again?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially if we're gonna get in a fight in a war with White Walkers. I gotta think that someone's gonna be like, hey, let's use that really strong fire weapon we have.
Right. What could stop ice? Fire. And then speaking of White Walkers, yeah, there was stuff in there that looked like it was probably, and again, we have to be realistic here. This is a TV show with a budget, so I think there was some repurposed Hardhome stuff there, and at the same time, it also might have been sort of showing you the idea of them getting over the wall.
Yeah,
What
it looked like the wall there, so that was kind of like, ooh, like they're getting close.
Yeah, because that's got to happen, right? They're not going to just stop them at the wall.
Right,
you know?
yeah. I feel like the wall, it's got to go down.
Yeah.
Or not go down, they're going to go through it,
Through,
assumedly.
over it.
Over it, yeah. They can hoard to swarm over it.
That's right.
Yeah,
Although,
so-
what if the whole wall came down?
Just crashing down.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the, it's a book spoiler, never mind.
Right.
I was going to say there's something in the books that could maybe deal with that, but
Yeah.
maybe they'll whip it out.
Who knows?
all
Who
of a
knows?
sudden.
And then, also there were some visuals of dragons in there, one of which looked to be like flying over a city that, was it like somewhere in Westeros? Was it, King's Landing is what I was curious about.
Yeah, that's what I think totally.
Yeah.
They're saying, pretty much almost teasing the audience of, hey, Dany's been talking about this for a long time, and this will happen.
Yeah. So like you said, it's not like anything here was like, oh my God, like it wasn't, Dany, decapitating Jon Snow, but it was like, it was still like, these glimpses that were like, oh, this is a little quick preview, of what's to come. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's one specific frame we have to talk about.
Yeah.
With it seems to support a theory of
Yeah.
the Tower of Joy, and it's just you can kind of see a hand that looks like young Ned Stark's hand with his armor there, and then it looks like a woman because if you look at her hand, look with the nails, it looks like a female hand, and then just blood everywhere and a big gash, like in her side or her stomach. So that seemingly is it seems to be. Going off the theories, is that is Ned and his sister Lyanna after giving birth to Jon Snow, and her father being Rhaegar, a Targaryen.
Yeah, so we have discussed this theory. Obviously, this is a long-standing book theory that now the TV show has been delving into, and we got outside the Tower of Joy. We didn't go inside yet, but yeah, I think that's got to be what that is. And that is the sort of important flashback as far as something we have not seen that is
Yeah.
probably going to solidify this theory that people have had for a long time. And yeah, that was actually, in a way, the sort of coolest thing we got
Yeah.
there. Mostly because I think it's going to finally answer this very long question.
Yeah, I still want to know the circumstances of exactly what went down in that room. And the gash, I couldn't tell if that was is that like a C-section or
Yeah.
was she stabbed and was killed or something? I don't know. So I'm very eager for Bran to take another nap and go see what happened there.
Right, except hopefully not as tragic as his last nap.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think, I'm one of those people who thinks it's going to be that she died in childbirth sort of thing, whether they had to do some sort of C-section or not, that she, the idea that she and Rhaegar had fallen in love. And yeah, I think almost certainly that is what that image is. And so hopefully by the end of this season, and that the pace the show is moving, I think at this point, it will be this season.
Yep, they're burning through huge things one after the other every episode.
Yeah. So those are our thoughts on what we saw in Bran's visions. What did you think? What stood out to you most? What you were most excited by? And what do you think those glimpses were? Some of the stuff, the fire and the dragon, do you think that's what we think? And especially the Tower of Joy stuff. Is that what's happening? Let us know in the comments. So let us move on to a storyline that Terry and I have talked about this season before, which is we had a conversation about how Arya and Dany's storylines both felt really stagnant. And then the week after, Dany's storyline stopped being stagnant.
Yep.
Suddenly it was like, oh, she suddenly killed all the different calls and got all the Dothraki behind her. But Arya was still kind of in a rut until now. And it seems like this episode is finally veering her into a new direction and maybe away from Braavos. What do you think about what's happening here?
I've heard a lot of people say that her story's been really slow, but I've actually really enjoyed it, and I like to see like the growth. Like if we just had one episode of her like training, Daredevil training and stuff, and like she gets her eyes back at the end of the first episode or something like that, I wouldn't be that into the story. But I like sort of taking the time, and it's more believable that she's investing a lot of time there and like gaining these skills and developing these relationships with the weird like House of the Black and White. Is it the Faceless Men? Is it Faceless?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So I'm glad we've spent a lot of time there, and I feel like it'll be that more satisfying once she does leave. Looks like she's about to. I was always wondering what would be the thing that sent her off, like, or back in the direction of, the main plot, like Westeros. But I was a little let down that it was like, oh, I really like this actress.
Right. I saw the Babadook. She's really good at it.
Yeah. Oh, is she that same actress?
She's the lead. Oh, Babadook. Yes.
Arya, big Babadook fan.
Right.
So yeah, I was just like, okay. I mean, it was a nice moment, and that they shared together, and you could see that she felt really endeared to this woman. But to then like not do like complete the mission, pretty much knowingly going on the run by doing this, that she's gonna have a target on her back. And she's pretty much gonna have to like fight off assassins, I think, for the rest of her life, or until she makes a new deal with one of them. I just feel like you liked an actress, that wasn't a good motivation for that.
Right.
It's a bad career move, Arya.
I do. I want to reference Matt Fowler's review of this episode, because I did like how he said how Arya got caught up on Game of Thrones season 1 to 4 by watching that play. And also, I don't know. I think I was a little more critical of Arya's storyline than you. Again, not it happening at all, but it did take quite a while, because it was the end of last season and then all of this season so far. And maybe, I agree with you, it shouldn't have been like one episode, one montage, but I don't know, maybe 3 episodes and not however many it's been, 6 plus however it was at the end of last year, which is quite a few. I don't know. I think that it took a long time to get here. I do wonder. Now, what do you think about this? Jaqen, am I saying his name right? Always the question of Game of Thrones, the pronunciation. Should we take it at face or faceless value that he's just pissed and like she must die now, or she didn't do what we want her to do? Or could this almost be she passed the ultimate test?
With these people, I never freaking know. Right? He's like. For making her drink the poison and stuff. He's like, get her eyes back and everything. And I don't know. I feel like she did break the rules. I feel like this was not a test. I feel like this was, I want you to do this. This is what we do for a living.
Yes.
Oh my God! Side note: he actually was scraping the face off a dude.
It was a total Texas Chainsaw Massacre like face removal moment.
I thought it would be some sort of magic thing where they do that and it
No.
appears on the wall. I was like, no, he's just like, oh my God, that's disgusting.
He was Leatherface in the video.
Yeah. So I just feel like going back to what you're saying that that she did break the rules. This was not a test, and then the other girl, like assassin, the waif will go after her. I feel like she'll beat her in one-on-one stick combat and kill her.
Yes.
And then I feel like that will be like, he'll be like, a life is paid for the life. A girl has done a thing, but she did another thing, and now a girl is free.
Right. And will he say, Arya Stark? After all that. Again, I will reference one other thing Fowler wrote about, I think, in the previous review. But yeah, I think one problem with this storyline, though, was that it's not, I don't know about you, but I agree with Matt that I couldn't, it's not like I could ever root for Arya to stop being Arya. You know, it's like, we want her to, go get more revenge. We liked when she was getting revenge. Hopefully at some point meet up with some of her family members. So it's not like we're like, yeah, it's great that she's going to lose her identity and become a nameless, assassin who kills whoever she's told to. So I think that's the other reason that I am certainly happy we're getting this turn here. I do agree with you. That's also where I think things have been redundant. There's been a lot of stick fighting, but maybe you do need that final payoff. She's gotten her ass kicked so many times by the waif.
Did you ever time she hit her in the face?
yeah. A lot of beaten in the face. So it's time for Arya to get some stick fighting revenge.
Yeah, and I feel like Arya is going to be an important player in sort of the final battle of things to come. And so she would really need to be put through the ringer on a lot of training to get to the point where we believe she could take out some like high-level players in the Game of Thrones mythology. So I feel like we needed this, and then it was like she's moving onward, and that makes me happy.
I do agree with you that she'll come out of this obviously a more highly trained killer, and she was already pretty good at killing beforehand. So yeah, I do think she's going to use those skills. Let's make more Daredevil analogies. It'll be like she was trained by the Hand and betrayed them.
Yes.
But she still has those skills.
Yes.
And so she will be able to use those against some White Walkers and some other people.
She can put Needle to good work.
Yes. She found Needle. So I think we're both happy though that she's moving on, right? Yeah. Let us talk about Dany, who we mentioned sort of for a while. She and Arya both seemed to have these very strange storylines where they were kind of not moving forward. Dany has begun in a big way to move forward, clearly by taking complete control of the Dothraki, getting the entire army behind her. But I want to talk about, this is not a brand new theory. In fact, Jim Vejvoda has had this theory for quite a while, a couple years now. He would come up to me and talk to me about it. But is Dany sort of heading in a heroic direction, or might she be sort of considered a villain by the end of this with the way she's amassing power?
That's the big question. Whenever the subject comes up, because it is a very popular theory, I just think of that scene where she wasn't getting her way with, I think it was the Masters or something like that, and she just had them ripped apart by dragons.
Yeah.
And she was just watching. She was like, oh yeah. And so she had that Targaryen madness, that dragon madness. Mm-hmm. So I do think she has it in her to be a villain. She's doing like righteous things, like freeing slaves and everything, that's what we've seen her do. So we've always been on her side. Like, if people are doing horrible things, sometimes it takes horrible actions to stop them, and you kind of like see that justified. But her new speech, which was a throwback to Khal Drogo's awesome speech from season 1, that had no like kind of righteousness to it. It's like, we are going to rip down their stone houses, and we are gonna eat their cows, and that was the toned down version. I didn't want to say everything she said.
We're gonna watch their TV without their giving permission.
Yeah. So. So I feel like that is a possibility that she could go down that path. Because if you unleash an army of Dothraki screamers on Westeros, it's not going to be pretty, right? And they're going to do what Dothraki do, which is awful, horrible things, and raping and pillaging, and destroying and looting things. So.
I feel like it might be a sort of very morally murky, gray path we're going on with her, because I don't think it's not like she's going to become like Ramsay, like in the villain sense of just like deplorable. But it would be a very Game of Thrones thing. And again, keeping in mind that, while they're now ahead of the books, they know from George R.R. Martin the big beats. Like, I could see it leading towards a thing where, like, what if she in conquering Westeros like kills or re-kills Jon Snow or Sansa or someone we do care about,
Right.
And it's still a win for her, and in a way a righteous win, but it's in like someone we love being taken out or someone we know is fighting for their right cause, taken out at the same time.
Yeah, for anyone to have victory in Game of Thrones, someone we like, a lot of people we like are gonna lose. Like I can't think of anyone in Westeros who would be happy to see her. You know what I mean? Show up on 3 dragons with a giant army behind her. So that it will be bad news for more than a couple of people when she shows up. And even if Jon winds up being her sister, as like that fan theory.
Jon's her sister.
Sorry, brother. Whoa, even crazier theory than you thought. You thought you knew it was going to happen, you didn't yet. If she was Jon's sister.
Yeah.
That even then, like, what's that going to do? She's going to be like, oh, well, I didn't like my last brother. Yeah, Dracarys.
Right. And I could see that happening. The idea that they are blood and relatives. Well, we're like, oh, they're going to team up now. But it would be very Game of Thrones if, oh, they're related, and then they kill each other, or one of them kills the other.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, ultimately, I could see her kind of going down the path of, like really going kind of villain, like Dark Dany. But then like the White Walkers show up, and I might snap her out of it, and she's like, "Wait, we should all unite and fight as one as for humanity," and, fight the White Walkers as they descend on like King's Landing or something.
I mean, clearly the White Walkers are sort of the big X factor here, and it's hard not to think that there's got to be some version of we're all united against this common foe, and even like Littlefinger and his forces and all these different forces maybe have to fight together. But it's not going to be, that won't be the ending. Like, we have to put aside our differences. And, today we fought as one. Even if they pause to fight the White Walkers, I could still see, like, once that's over and the very ending could still be Dany being like, thanks for the help, Jon Snow. And then there's that decapitation. I
feel like there's being a lot of blood at the end, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. I wouldn't say, I don't know if she's going to become a villain. But I just, the idea that she has no allegiance to these people and only kind of hates Westeros for like what happened to her family, I think will probably come in. Yeah.
And just a reminder that her slogan isn't like peace and equality, it's fire and blood.
Right. Good point. So there could be some dark times coming with Dany. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Do you think Dany is gonna turn into a villain, or maybe it's a little different than that? Might she end up fighting and maybe killing some people we love before the end of Game of Thrones? Let us know in the comments. So let's talk about Sam, who this is only his second appearance, Sam and Gilly, this season. Clearly, it's not like we're spending a ton of time with them, but there would be people who would argue, why are we spending any time with them at this point, right? He left the wall. We got big, we are clearly heading towards the end in a way we never have on this show, where it's like everything matters and the show's moving at such an accelerated rate. So why are we even pausing to spend time with Sam, even though we did meet another awful father on Game of Thrones.
Oh my God.
In that situation, which clearly made, I already felt Sam was a sympathetic character, but even more, you're like, oh man, this is what he comes from. But do you think that there's still going to be importance to Sam's storyline that will factor in, given the time we're spending here with him?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's like the one character who's not a jerk. So we need that. He's like one of a couple characters who are like genuinely likable and endearing characters in the show. Not everyone needs to be like a super assassin and like a badass, you know? Like some people get caught up in these like fantasy tropes, and because he doesn't fit into any of the cool ones that they're like, why are we wasting time on this? It's like, no, the show is about like different kinds of characters and like overcoming these like unique struggles, and he definitely has an interesting struggle of, pretty much brought the worst thing home possible to make his father. Although when his father found out, I thought he was pretty reasonable. He's like, what? And he started calling Gilly like an it and everything. Yeah. And then he was like, fine, she could stay here and I'll give her a job. And I was like, that's actually not bad, all things considered. He could have killed her. That's where I thought it was going.
Right. I will, that scene was interesting because Sam, he still couldn't speak up for her while they were all still there. It's like he never, you wondered if that's where the scene was going as far as his dad is calling her an it and a whore and all this sort of stuff. Would he say, you can't talk to her like that, while she and the family are sitting there? But he doesn't. But I thought that was realistic as far as like Sam has grown as a character and he's gotten stronger as a character. But when he goes back home for the first time ever since he was cast off, he's still kind of like the cowering little boy. Obviously, this was his life, his entire life. So I liked, even though of course it makes it some audience members like, you wimp, but it's like, I get it, you know. But then he still, of course, makes this decision that they're going to leave, and you know he's going to leave with something very important, which is that sword. And you know, Valyrian steel and those swords. It's not. I don't think the show has quite spent as much time reinforcing their importance as the books have, but they're still pretty important.
Yeah, I feel like if you spend too much time on this show kind of talking about how cool these magic like dragon swords are, that it goes a little too into like deep fantasy that the show has long tried to avoid. Although now it's like just barely like head first into all of it. So I think it's fine. I think it's understood that these things kill White Walkers. And while they didn't talk about it a lot throughout the show, they definitely showed the power of it with Jon like shattering that guy. So I think we know what they do and how important they are, because every time you see one, you're like, okay, that's going to be important later. We're going to need that. So I feel like it's cool that he has one. I don't know his ultimate purpose. I don't see him, you know, Sam the Slayer, you know, returning anytime soon of him. But I see him giving that sword to someone who can put it to good use. And I don't know if it'll be as simple as him going back to the Wall, because Jon won't even be there by the time he goes back, assumedly, because Jon wants to move on and he wants to go to Winterfell and stuff. So I feel like Sam, I feel like he'll actually take a different path and wind up somewhere we didn't expect him, and his knowledge and expertise knowing all about the White Walkers firsthand and what can defeat them, that will be very valuable to like someone else, like a Littlefinger or something like that. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think he'll probably end up teaming with someone we have never seen him with before. And the fact that he has that sword, again, it's like Sam, he was able to kill a White Walker, but he's not certainly expert swordsman, but he has that sword. And there are certainly people out there who could use it. I do like, and this is a complete non-Game of Thrones moment, but I do like the idea of him throwing the sword in slow motion to Jon, who catches it, now has two Valyrian steel swords. You know, and just starts like mowing down White Walkers left and right. I just thought about how Sam is sort of the Neville Longbottom of this series.
And Neville did get that great moment.
Neville did get that great moment.
Well, Sam actually already had that. So this would be a cool kind of the Sword of the Morning Part 2. And he's like,
or maybe Sam will have two Valyrian swords. Jon throws him the other one. That'd be amazing. He gets like a 10-minute.
It's like this Darth Maul scene, like
including the flips. That's the final scene of the show. It's like the most choreographed scene ever. But yeah, so I guess I think we both agree though that Sam is going to be important, and the sword alone, but also I think where he goes with it is going to end up playing a big role in endgame of this show. All right, so final segment here. This time we're going to have to give the big book warning. We haven't done it in a while, especially since we've gotten past the books for the most part. But some stuff happened in this episode that makes us think they might finally be diving into a major part of the books the show has skipped over. So if you haven't read the books, we are about to spoil some pretty big things that happened in the fourth and fifth Song of Ice and Fire. Am I saying that order right? I believe so. Books. Yeah.
They get it.
All right. So you've been warned. Here goes. So this episode brought back Benjen Stark, which was, an interesting thing to do on the show. But at the same time, it was also completely introducing the concept of cold hands, which has not even been dealt with on this show. And a lot of people thought they never were going to do it because they skipped over his sort of two big sequences. Is this laying the groundwork, and there's other reasons we think so as well, laying the groundwork for Lady Stoneheart to finally come onto Game of Thrones?
First, I just want to say that when Cold Hands showed up, it was so cool, especially as like a longtime book reader. He's just a character that kind of showed up who's like really cool. He had that nice like mystery about him. And obviously when you go on the internet, people have already figured out who it was. But I remember reading it, not realizing who it was. And just sort of really enjoying that mystery and his this mysterious figure who knows everything, and he's undead, but he's on our side, and he's riding a giant elk.
Right.
Which they didn't do in the show, understandably. I guess. So I thought that was really cool, and seeing him did give me hope. Then I'm like, wait a second, if they're gonna put him in after all this time, that could definitely open the door for Lady Stoneheart.
We should mention in passing, by the way, just because there is a lot of reports out there mentioning the fact that there was some guy on Reddit who had read like the original manuscript to one of the books where George R. R. Martin's editor said, "Is this Benjen about Cold Hands?" And supposedly with George R. R. Martin going, "No." So people saying, "Oh, so it's not that in the books, only in the show." I'd say, who knows how true that is? If it is true, if George R. R. Martin was maybe lying to his editor, I could see him doing it until he has to tell him. Or maybe the show is melding two characters together. We don't know, but either way, it was definitely, this is the way the show was introducing Cold Hands. I don't think there's going to be another Cold Hands out there. And yeah, it did. And I thought they're never going to do Cold Hands on the show.
How awesome was it when he had like that mace fire thing? It was just taking them out. They had a scythe too, and it was like, wah! Like just taking out all the White Walkers. That was so awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty handy to have right when Bran could use that help right now. And yeah, as far as there's two reasons to think that Lady Stoneheart might be coming now. One is just the fact that they just did Cold Hands and we thought they might never do him, you know. So okay, if they did that, maybe there still is time to bring in Lady Stoneheart later. The other reason I'm thinking it might be happening, and very likely actually after this episode, is they suddenly brought back a lot of stuff that we associate, again, final warning for the books right now, that we associate with Lady Stoneheart and Catelyn Stark. They suddenly brought back Walder Frey, but more importantly, they brought back her brother, Edmure. Yep. They suddenly are talking about the Blackfish, her uncle, and we know we're going to see him again soon. And they name-dropped the Brotherhood Without Banners, who we haven't seen on the show since like season 3, who in the books is who she shows up with.
Yeah.
So it all seems like they're laying the groundwork, you know, and you know, because this is the thing the show has to do is kind of remind people like these things exist. We might not have mentioned them in a long time, you know.
And sort of reminding you about the Red Wedding, and then that was her vendetta, right? It's like she just came back and she was driven just to eliminate everybody
associated with it,
even no matter how what's the word I'm looking for here? Even if they weren't really that associated with it, she would just go after him anyways and kill him.
Yeah.
So. I feel like, it's just bringing back all those elements in the same episode, and those name drops, like you were saying, it seems to signal that that's happening. Although for the longest time, I was like, they actually don't need to bring her back because I just thought maybe it was just a thing that happened in the book that wasn't ultimately that important to the overall story. Maybe it is if they are going that way, but I just thought the idea of bringing back a main character back from the dead is just so big that if you do it more than once, the show becomes like kind of weird.
Yeah.
So I thought they were saving just the one big resurrection for Jon Snow. Yeah. Right? I mean, some other characters will come back, but I feel like you use that on him, and so it has greatest impact. But if you use it on like her too, then it's like, well, why don't we go get Ned? Can't we just glue his head back on? And you know, why wouldn't we bring everybody back?
I mean, there's definitely that argument to be made, and I also was one of those people who thought, okay, if they're skipping her, maybe it is because George R. R. Martin told them the entire story, and they're like, oh, Lady Stoneheart actually, it's exciting to see her, but then because she hasn't in the books really done anything, you know, even though it's like she's on a quest for vengeance, she hasn't like changed the story yet. And maybe she never would. So if they do choose to bring her in now, then you must expect that, okay, I guess she does affect things in a big way, that something is coming where her presence will really change, you know, the direction of the story. Because I agree with you, you don't want to kind of make on a show that's so much about the weight of all these deaths, you don't want to lessen it by saying, oh, actually, you know.
Yeah, because like she'll show up and then like Joffrey will show up and be like, you know, like who else? All the wolves that have been killed are gonna show up and they're zombie wolves, and like literally everyone. Khal Drogo's back and he's like, you know. It's like literally everyone could just show up again. Like, so you want a death to still maintain its importance and its impact when it happens.
And it's one of these things where I know I'm only saying this, I guess, for people who haven't read the books and don't care that they're being spoiled. But yeah, reminder, the Brotherhood Without Banners was the group that Beric, the guy with the flaming sword, who was the first character who was coming back from the dead that we ever met. And again, in the books, that's who Catelyn is with. In fact, she's leading them as Lady Stoneheart on this quest for vengeance. So yeah, the fact that they suddenly brought up the Brotherhood Without Banners and mentioned their status and that they're still out there fighting, after this one episode, I'm suddenly thinking now I'd be surprised if they don't introduce her.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. Although if they do bring her back, this goes to a complaint I've had about this season overall, which is just that it's moving way too fast and huge things are happening without like the setup or payoff or just time to absorb what happened. So I feel like if we bring back her and the Brotherhood Without Banners and like all these, it's introducing yet another thing we just don't have room for to fully like explore on the show, especially like we're past the halfway mark here, you know.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if you do that, that's something huge, and I feel like it'll just be like crammed in because it was part of the book story. I don't know, not because it's necessary. So I'm not really sure. Obviously, it's hard to say, but I worry that an already overstuffed season will have this like huge crazy thing show up.
I hope that the way they can make it work, again, assuming they do it, is that the fact that, okay, they've brought back her uncle, or they're about to bring back her uncle, they've brought back her brother, and so and knowing Walder Frey and what's going on, probably one of them is still going to die. I mean, her brother's a prisoner, but he could very easily suddenly be. They had to get the actor back from Outlander as it was, so his time is probably not as great as it could be. So it still could be her sort of coming back involved in that in a way, even though it's still kind of funny after 3 years to finally have all these characters return at once. Hopefully it can all sort of flow, because this season is kind of crazy fast paced, especially to previous seasons. We joke a lot about how suddenly characters are just traveling like super quick, you know, like I'm gonna go to this place and suddenly it's like they're there the next episode. I do think we might have to be prepared for that, but hopefully if they bring her back, it could still be sort of the cliffhanger, you know. So maybe we don't have to. If she comes back next week, who knows? But I don't think it's that. I think if she is coming in, it might be the end of the season, because that's still a pretty damn good, you know, oh my God, you know, way to end a season, and then we can really get some more time with it next year.
Although I feel like because that's in the books that they wouldn't end on that. I could actually see that happening next episode.
Right.
She's the reveal, but then we get something crazy, like a big death or a big twist that not even the book readers saw coming. I feel like that's the way to end the season.
Right. Or Dany could show up with it. And again, we were talking about how it's like Dany, she needs 1,000 ships, and suddenly Euron's building 1,000 ships.
Like you're saying, the way this show goes, he'll have them built like by next week, and then they'll show up the next week after that.
Yeah, that's what Fowler said in his review, and it could be. But so those are our thoughts on Lady Stoneheart, who I am still excited for. You know, if they can make it work in sort of a natural way on the show, because I'd put myself in the place of we're just not going to see her, but now suddenly it seems like we probably will.
It seems like it might be in the cards.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think are we going to finally meet Lady Stoneheart on the show, and are you excited about that? I'm sure some people are very excited. And how do you think it should work story-wise at this point? That, you know, do you want the slow reveal, or, you know, hell, next week she just shows up and starts killing people? She just kills Walder Frey right at the time. Let us know in the comments. That is it for this week on Dragons on the Wall. If you have questions or comments, feel free to tweet us. Actually, you should tweet Joshua too. I was going to just give Terry's Twitter, but she's not even here. She's not in the country. Are you underscore?
No, I'm just at Joshua Yale.
At Joshua Yale. He lives the dream of just having his name plain and simple.
Not many of those in the world.
Yeah, I am the Eric Goldman, because I couldn't get the regular name. And Terry is Terry_Schwartz. So feel free to tweet any of us and put hashtag Dragons on the Wall. And for plenty more Game of Thrones, keep it here at IGN.